Welcome to the next in our study of women of the Bible. Today we're looking at two queens, one deposed and one most courageous. The first is Vashti, and both of these queens are found in the book of Esther. So the pride and the splendour of the Medo-Persian Empire were on display for 180 days before all of King Ahasuerus' officials and allies. Building support for his coming Greek campaign from 482 to 479 BC, the king climaxed his lavish celebration with a 7-day banquet for citizens of Shushan, the site of his royal palace. Persian monarchs insisted upon deference. Not even the queen was allowed into the throne room unless summoned. To be called by the king was a rigid order, not an invitation. On the final day of the feast, such a proclamation was issued for Queen Vashti, who refused to come. She was hosting her own feast for the women of the palace when she was called to appear before the men. Her action could have been a response to the way in which women were dictated to, including the queen being excluded from such revelry. Some historians believe she feared the gawking of a crowd of drunken officials and commoners. Others suggest that she may have been pregnant at the time. Vashti's decision to disobey the order of Ahasuerus, probably assuming he would forgive her later, was a serious miscalculation. The sovereign had announced her arrival in front of his guests, making her refusal equally public, and the king was humiliated in the presence of his subjects. The king and his counselors realized immediately that disastrous repercussions could occur in every household, as other wives might follow the queen's precedent. The king acted upon the advice of his officials, whereas Vashti herself had apparently unwisely made the decision to defy her husband and king. A decree was sent out, and Vashti was eventually replaced by Queen Esther. The two queens, one a Gentile, the other a Jewess, demonstrate diverse and antithetical responses. Unlike Esther, who courageously yet humbly disobeyed the king by appearing unsummoned, Vashti defiantly disregarded his command with no recorded apology or explanation. Esther acted in the best interests of her people, whose lives were in her hands, and at the request of her foster parent. Vashti apparently acted in her own interest, and without counsel or petition of anyone. Yet each is used sovereignly to accomplish God's purposes. Vashti lives in history as the queen who was deposed for daring to challenge her husband, as well as the irrevocable royal law of the Medes and the Persians. This flows into the account of Queen Esther. How could we in contemporary times imagine the fear and the insecurity that would plague Queen Esther, who was chosen solely on the basis of her beauty and appeal to the king? She was no princess with the clout of her father's kingdom to enhance her position in the court. When she was not summoned for 30 days, she did not know if the king had found someone more pleasing or if she was merely losing her influence. As a displaced orphan Jew, Esther had been reared by Mordecai, an older relative. Whether at his bidding, by force of evil officials, or by her own choice, she had entered the beauty contest and won. Now, Mordecai's sources informed Esther that the Jewish people were scheduled for extinction by the wicked Haman, a self-promoter who had elevated himself to vice-regent, second only to the monarch. King Ahasuerus, faced with a desperate challenge to survival, Esther pondered Mordecai's question. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Esther 4:14. 3 principles are embodied in his advice. Number 1, no place of privilege can ever exempt a person from responsibility to respond to God's call. Number 2, although a situation may look hopeless, God is never helpless. And number 3, a God-given opportunity is an individual's received privilege. Courageously, Esther formulated her plan, even if it meant dying in the effort. In the court, she had been taught to prepare herself physically, but she had also learnt to prepare herself spiritually, as was evidenced by her fasting in Esther 4:16 and Esther 9 and verse 31. According to local traditions, with patience the queen invited Ahasuerus and Haman to a pair of banquets. Then, seizing the right moment, she presented her case, not questioning the king's justice or righteousness, but humbly asking for mercy for herself and her people. Divine guidance seemingly directed Esther's thoughts and works and actions. She had won the respect and the ear of her royal husband. In response, he assigned to her the task of rewriting the law. See Esther 9 and verse 29. And she became quite properly the heroine of her people. To every woman, she is a reminder of God's sovereignty. God used her beauty, her intelligence, and perhaps even her respectful attitude towards her husband, as well as a remarkable, fearless faith to accomplish his will. Through her obedience, Esther became a true star, which is the meaning of her Persian name, in the kingdom. Thanks very much.